Donald Trump's lawyers might want to take a hard look at his defense strategy because this week, the Department of Justice showed once again that it isn't messing around. Right now, there is a legal fight brewing over the Trump team's request for a special master to independently review the documents seized in the FBI search of the former president's home. That filing contained the usual fragments of the Trump defense that Donald Trump and his allies were completely cooperating with agencies' efforts to recover documents. Well, not according to the agencies themselves. They also claimed that Trump has broad powers to control records from his time in office. Well, not according to the Department of Justice. Late Tuesday evening, the DOJ submitted its own 36-page filing claiming that Donald Trump had no standing to ask for a special master. The DOJ also used their response to lay out the most comprehensive and detailed window yet into this investigation. According to the Justice Department, Trump and his team were not completely cooperating. Far from it. In fact, the filing suggests that Trump and his allies attempted to hide classified information and to obstruct the investigation, which ultimately led to the warrant and the August 8th search where federal agents seized 33 boxes, which contained over 100 pieces of classified information. These documents were recovered not only from a storage room, but from Donald Trump's own personal office, even inside of his desk. Some of these recovered documents are at the highest level of classification. So high, in fact, that in some instances, even the officials conducting the review of the documents required additional clearances before they were permitted to even review certain documents. In a Wednesday night filing, the Trump team renewed its request for a special master, and the filing confused even some of the most conservative legal minds. So to join me now, and one of the greatest legal minds, in my opinion, he's going to try to help make sense of all of this, is my friend and national security attorney, Brad Moss. Brad, look, there's a public face of the Trump defense, and then, as you and I know, there's what you actually file in court. An example is for weeks, Trump and his lawyers have been trying to wave away all of these issues by saying in the media appearances that Trump declassified all of this material. But then in their filing last night, they argued that the special master, if they get it, has to possess top security clearance in order to review the materials. I mean, Brad, what exactly is the Trump strategy at this point?
Yeah, I don't think anyone, including the Trump legal team, knows what their strategy at this point is other than to delay this proceeding as long as they can and drag it out. Yeah, the filing made very little sense. It was incoherent at times, and it didn't really respond to a lot of the very damaging information and legal arguments put forward in the government's filing from the previous night. They didn't address the obstruction issue that was laid out in very stark terms in the government's filing, other than to say the government mischaracterized the facts and then provided no information to explain how that had been done. They made this very interesting argument that there was no criminal matter, no criminal provision that could apply to a president holding on to a former president holding on to presidential records at his private residence, that the Espionage Act and all these other provisions are overruled or superseded by the Presidential Records Act. It's complete nonsense. It will go nowhere in court. And this is the difference between cable news lawyers and real lawyers.
Yeah, so Brad, what I want to do, too, is I want to kind of slow the roll a little bit here, because I think people are very excited about what's possibly going to happen, which is an appointment of a special master in this case, which may or may not happen, depends on what the judge does. But even if one is appointed, that doesn't necessarily mean that Trump is going to get prosecuted, right? Just because a special master gets appointed is not necessarily a guarantee that the DOJ is going to move forward with an indictment. You agree?
Yeah. With or without a special master, there's no guarantee anyone gets indicted. I believe there's sufficient evidence to bring a charge against not only Donald Trump, but quite potentially against one of his lawyers, Christina Bobb. But that aside, all the special master would be doing right now is, one, going through the limited set of records that were identified as attorney-client privileged, which I don't think the government really cares to have anyways in the end, and then addressing this novel question of executive privilege for a former president and whether executive privilege privileged documents could be withheld from the executive branch over the objection of the current incumbent president in the context of a criminal and national security investigation. I don't think that's going to play out the way Donald Trump thinks it will.
So, Brad, I have to ask you, your wheelhouse is national security. An interesting argument that was raised in Trump's late filing last night is this idea of challenging the ODNI, or the National Intelligence Assessment of the materials that have been seized from Mar-a-Lago. Can he successfully challenge that assessment?
No, I think I almost spit out my coffee when I first read that line, because that's simply ludicrous. Look, I deal with litigating against the government, including in classified matters, all the time. They routinely tell me, despite the fact that I hold an existing clearance, how little authority or standing I have to challenge anything with respect to national security. The idea that Donald Trump is going to get to challenge the existing ODNI's damage assessment is ludicrous. It's going to fall flat on its face. It's not going anywhere.
You know, Brad, also Trump's strategy seems, in my opinion, it's like he's lying down and spitting up in the air, because remember, he's the one who demanded that the search warrant be released. DOJ releases the warrant. All this damning information comes out. He then calls for the affidavit to be released unredacted. The court releases a partly redacted version that has even more damning information. He then files this motion for a special master and then opens the door for the DOJ to file its response that contained horribly damning information for Donald Trump. What is your assessment of how the DOJ has done this legal dance so far with the stuff that Trump has trumped up?
I think they're sitting here laughing, watching him continually punch himself in the face, essentially, with these actions. The reason we have as much transparency about how bad this is for Donald Trump is because of Donald Trump. Government would have been happy to just sat by, quietly done its work like it does in every other law enforcement investigation, and decided whether or not to indict or not to indict. And if there had been an indictment, any number of information would have come out, both through that indictment as well as through discovery and a potential trial. But Donald Trump kept poking the bear, and he kept saying, no, I want more. And he filed these actions to get stuff out. And sure enough, DOJ said, fine. You want us to tell you what's going on? We'll tell you. You're not going to like it. It doesn't look good for you. This is the problem of the Trump team, thinking this is a PR problem, when in reality, this is a serious criminal issue.
You mentioned a couple of minutes ago, and I also believe that we could be looking at an indictment that includes a co-defendant, which is maybe Trump's lawyer or lawyers. As we learn more about this investigation, Brad, it looks like there's a real likelihood that some of Trump's lawyers might even be witnesses or targets in this investigation. His lawyer, Christina Bobb, allegedly signed the certification claiming that all documents that were remaining at Mar-a-Lago had been produced to the government in compliance with the subpoena. And then Alina Habba, in a separate investigation by the New York State AG's office, said under oath that she had personally searched every corner of Mar-a-Lago for documents that were responsive. So she was on Fox News last night, not doing herself any more favors. Take a quick listen.
I'm somebody that has been in his office. I've seen it. I do have firsthand knowledge, as you know. I have been down there. I'm down there frequently. I have never seen that. I have never, ever seen that. That is not the way his office looks. Anybody that knows President Trump's office, he has guests frequently there.
You know, Brad, notably, Alina Habba doesn't sign off on any of these filings in the Mar-a-Lago case, nor does Christina Bobb. What's the legal exposure for some of these lawyers?
Yeah, both of them really need to stop talking on TV and get their own lawyers right about now, because at a minimum, they're both material fact witnesses. And if we recall back to the days of the Mueller probe and the Manafort prosecution, the government has precedent to be able to compel an individual's attorney to testify about material facts in reliance on what's known as the crime fraud exception to attorney-client privilege. A lawyer can't conspire to commit a crime with the client. So Christina Bobb has that exposure because of the affidavit. Did Donald Trump lie to her, or was she conspiring with him to misrepresent information to the Federal Bureau of Investigation? And Alina Habba, she's now admitting she's got firsthand knowledge of what that office was like. She said she did that search for the stuff from the New York Attorney General's investigation. I don't know how you would have missed these documents with the big, huge cover letters on them and nice big, color, red and yellow. Certainly she would have seen that. The idea that these individuals are still talking publicly boggles the mind.
You know, Brad, according to Bloomberg, the DOJ is unlikely to wait until after the midterms to reveal any charges against Trump. Do you agree that the DOJ should wait in this case?
I do, and it's for actually two reasons. One is the obvious one of we're less than 90 days out from the midterms. Even though Donald Trump's not on the ballot, it would have obvious political ramifications and implications. It doesn't need to be about Donald Trump for the midterms. Let that play out. Let the voters decide what they want for candidates. You can still indict them in December for all I care. The other issue is I don't think DOJ is ready to bring indictments against him or his lawyers. And I think in particular, they're likely going to run down these factual elements with the lawyers and see about compelling testimony before the grand jury and potentially flip these individuals against him to flesh out even further the extent of the obstruction and the efforts to conceal where the records were held. That, I think, still needs to be fleshed out further. And I think that's where they're going to pursue for now.
Yeah, you know, Brad, I appreciate that insight because I think people need to be reminded this is an ongoing investigation and that it's certainly not at the point where perhaps you do have the ability to indict, but maybe it's premature. Brad Moss, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Katie.